So, a new day. Yesterday we were looking a bit at the dynamic nature of our experience. And in Buddhism, especially Tibetan Buddhism, there's quite a lot of attention to lineages of transmission of the teaching. But all of us are caught up in lineage and transmission, because to be alive is to exist between the dead and the unborn. The dead are gone, but we, in being born, inherit a lot. We inherit language, we inherit culture, we inherit the technology and the orientation of the society we're born in. And we inhabit that world, transforming it in some way. And then it gets passed on, if there are children or extended family members, through our conversation, and then we move towards death. And life goes on. So, at each stage of our existence, we are absorbing and generating. Just as we breathe in and breathe out, we receive information and stimulus from the environment around us, and we offer the moods of our participation. So even a very small baby is absorbing a great deal, but is also giving out in an effortless way, the way they smile and they look around, and we're charmed by small babies. We find, most of us I think, find them quite fascinating. So in that way, the pulsation of giving and receiving is ceaseless in life. And from the Buddhist point of view, again, it's like, well, what is there? When we look, we see what is there is movement, not entities. Entity is an interpretation which disguises the dynamic nature of formation. As soon as conception occurs, an incredible number of transformations are going on inside the womb. And the baby develops and comes to term, and then comes out of the mother's body, and then is again immediately in a dynamic formation. Drinking in milk, pissing and shitting, the first excreta that comes out of the baby has a particular color and smell, and then it transforms and changes, and the baby gets gradually weaned from the breast, takes more food, and so its shit and piss smells different, and so on. And these are the changes of life, that it's an unfolding of different patterns. The patterns manifest and can be identified through their repetition. But of course, pattern recognition is a kind of abstraction. What we have is the immediacy of each moment, and each moment, and each moment. So this is the key focus. This is the key kind of massage for our mind, which allows us to soften the tissues, to soften the rigidity of how we hold ourselves in place as being this particular person with these particular qualities. Because once you have a definition, the tendency is to project the definition out and to look at emerging events as exemplars, as examples of the pattern that you've already described, rather than seeing the freshness of the unfolding. So of course, if we're going to be human beings and talk together, we have to communicate descriptions of what we see. But when we describe something, there's two main modes of that. The mode of samsara, or the mode of limitation, or the mode of solidification, is to start from the point of view that there are these fixed entities in the world, and I'm simply seeing what is there and describing it. And the second way, which arises in the path of meditation, is to see that what I experience as being there arises in a dialogue with my mode of participation. So if I'm distracted or being in a hurry, if I'm going down the pavement, the people I encounter are obstacles because I need to get to the station on time to get the train. If I'm in a more relaxed mood, I might be looking at the people and how they dress or their posture. I might be fascinated by the way human beings move and interact. So my mood, my orientation, my availability is part of the revealing of the world. And this is a central thing. So again and again, it's about including ourselves in the world. Rather than seeing self is inside and the world is outside, and the world is in some ways a done deal, which I'm kind of catching up on or finding my way of relating to all these things, by starting from, as it were, the inside, that I'm in the world. When two people come together and have sex, they're in the world. And if conception takes place, the development is happening in the mother's body, in the world. And when the baby comes out of the mother's body, they come out into the world. And the mother was always in the world. We are always on the inside. And the dualistic split of self and other seems to create this great sundering, this separating in a fundamental way between what is inside and what is outside. But when we pay attention to our body, we start to be able to put this into question, because we breathe in the world into me, and we breathe out me into the world. We drink and then we pee. We hear and then we speak. We are responsive creatures, and we're not responding, as it were, with a threshold where I choose to be on the inside or not. Insideness is what there is. This is the simplicity of non-duality. Duality is the interpretation that I am apart from other people. I am not a part of things. I'm not a participant. I don't have intrinsic belonging, but I have intrinsic separation and isolation. And then from this, I have to work out what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go. And so the isolated ego formation is concerned with choices, options. How do I identify what might be possible and what do I want? And it's quite a lonely business, because there's a lot of, once you start seeing a world full of things, do I have to? Do I want to? How will I know? And then we make a decision, and afterwards we think, why did I do that? As if somehow from a position of isolation, of receiving information, I can then decide what is a good thing to do. But of course, the phenomenological field, the field of living, presenting phenomena, is beyond arithmetic. It's beyond totalization. You can't work out all the variables. Now, we know this in life in terms of life choices, choosing a partner, choosing subjects when you're at school, choosing a job. Because of the unfolding nature of our existence, what seemed like a good idea may turn out not to be so good. We don't know. This is why war is such a terrible thing, because war involves huge mobilization of resources towards particular readings of situations which are often shown to be false. Billions and billions and billions of dollars and pounds have been wasted in Afghanistan and all over the world, laying landmines, dropping bombs which are not found until much later, people having their legs blown off, all because it seemed a good idea that we are the good guys, they're the bad guys. If we get rid of the bad guys, then the world will be good. Now, even if you have a very, very tiny garden, you will know that gardens mean weeds. That's what they mean. If you've got a garden, you've got weeding to do. because you've got flowers and you've got weeds, and you like the flowers and you don't like the weeds. But the sky is open and the wind blows and the little seeds come flying over the wall into your garden and the weeds come up. That's life. You can't get rid of the weeds. If you want to really get rid of the weeds, you get a lot of cement and you pour it over the garden. Then you don't have much of a garden. So if you want to have life, a garden where things grow, you're going to have weeds. The good guys and the bad guys belong together in the world. And that makes it a little bit scary. And that's why the good guys and the bad guys are helped if they can have a conversation. But if you think the bad guys are really bad, the axis of evil, the devil's spawn, and so on, the way that countries stigmatize particular nations or racial groups, religious groups, it becomes implacable. Now I know who you definitely are, and I know that you are bad. I will have no rest and no freedom until you are annihilated. And this is the logic. So when we throw around words like terrorist, what the word terrorist does is it goes from the description, this is somebody who would like to kill me. Killing me is an activity. You have to pull a trigger or stab me or hit me in the head with a brick. You have to do something to kill me. You can't just say bang, bang, and I fall down dead. So you want to kill me, that's an activity. I perhaps can engage with you in a way to alter that form of activity. But once I say you are a terrorist, that is something which exists outside time and space. That is some eternal truth about you. And therefore it moves from activity which is unfolding and amenable to some kind of interaction into the sense of a true enduring essence, a definitive essence, and therefore we have to deal with the terrorists. And so we've supported killing people with the drones, assassination attempts and so on, because we know that these people are eternally bad. These people are under the power of an idea. Their idea is Britain's not a very nice country. Britain's full of colonial bigots, and getting them wiped out would be a good idea. History might prove them right. But we, being alive, don't want to be killed. But they are hurting. And the very great difficulty that countries have to apologize about the harm done makes it so much more difficult. Very few people want to apologize because it will cost you. I saw a little bit on the television last night about a case that's gone through the courts again about sexual abuse in one of the Christian Brothers schools. And this has been going on for years and years and years, and all the evidence is there, but there's no apology. There's absolutely no apology from the Christian Brothers. And that's what the people say. How could they not say sorry? They knew this was happening. They didn't stop it happening. So once you take up an implacable position, once you say, I'm not going to be in communication about something, it leads to hatred. And some of the people who had been abused were speaking with a lot of energy about these people, and this is what they did. And it's very understandable. So from this point of view, dualism, the separation of subject and object, and the imputation of true essences in subject and object is very, very powerful and greatly restricts the kind of moves that we can make and intensifies the kind of moves that we can make. So yesterday we were looking at the way in which we have different kinds of clothing. We clearly have our outer social relational clothing that covers our naked bodies, but we also have the clothing of the contents of our mind. Thoughts, feelings, memories, plans, intentions. And when we take that clothing or cladding to be definitive of who we are, then we have to protect something which is fundamentally not self as if it were self. So this is in Buddhism called ignorance, or ignoring the fact that you are maintaining a delusion. So as we know in the meditation, when a thought arises and we get merged into it, when we get fused and carried away by the thought, it is as if this thought is deeply meaningful, and it is as if this thought is me. I am thinking this. But I am thinking this because this thought came into my mind. Now this thought is going out of my mind. So it was only my thought in the transient moment that I was able to merge with it. Once it's gone, it's not my thought anymore. So in that way, the constituents of self are like clothing. Unborn awareness is like the naked body. The naked body, or the freshness, is where the real sensitivity is. When we wear clothes, we dull the sensitivity of our skin. But if you're in the summer and you're on a beach someplace and you've got no clothes or minimal clothing, then you feel much more. You feel the breeze across your skin. You're more connected. So naked awareness is more vital and alive than the constructions of clothing. Some of the clothing that we wear is anxiety formations, what will other people think about me, predictive, I'm going to fail, I'm going to mess up, nobody likes me, definitive of situations, things will never change, they'll never get better. When you sit in meditation, you start to be able to see what thoughts are. So if a thought arises, no one loves me, it's a thought. What is the truth of the thought? Well, it may be that your life, for causes and due to causes and conditions, has become isolated. So the thought, no one loves me, which then gets energized with some self-pity and energized with shame and a feeling of not wanting other people to know how pathetic my life is. The isolation and density and intensity of this thought seems to be referring to something self-existing. But when we're young and we're running around at school, at least most of us have some sort of friendships and connections. So at one stage in my life, I had more friends, and now I don't have friends. So we can see this is a process. This is various moments of perception of options and decisions that were made, maybe moving house, the end of an unhappy relationship, you decide I can't bear to be here, so you move to a new place, but you don't know anyone there, and life becomes more difficult. Due to causes and conditions, I find myself in isolation. That is a process description, and that is how it is. Therefore, if I make some effort to change the causes and conditions, it's likely that I can make more connection with other people. Processes always have the possibility of linking out with other processes because they are gestures of energy, movements of energy, which can then be connected and transformed. But if you sit with a totalized definition, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, and this is the eternal truth about me, the hopelessness that that's likely to engender will inhibit any new possibility of seeking connectivity. Because I can, from my definition, I can predict people don't like me, so what would be the point of going to that meeting? Or what would be the point of joining that group? Because all I get is more evidence that people don't like me. So my assumption is transformed into an eternal truth, which then governs the kind of options I can perceive and decisions I can make. This is what in Buddhism is referred to as attachment. We bind ourselves into a particular reading, a particular formulation, and on the basis of that seeming truth, our decisions unfold again and again and again. But if we attend to the dynamics of our emergent life, we see that it's always in relation to various factors that arise. Some of these factors will appear to be external. Some of these factors will appear to be internal. But the more we see that external and internal are always in dialogue, the feeling that you betrayed me, you let me down, we start to think, oh, that is a feeling tone. And there is some truth in it. But the reason you betrayed me is because we have a complicated connectivity, and there are various things that I did in my relationship with you that pissed you off. So it's not surprising that at a certain point, if you get a chance, you go off and do something else. And then I feel let down. So if we see the sequence of cause and effect, it's much more difficult to come to finalized conclusions. So in very general Buddhist saying, they say, all compounded things arise from causes. And this cause has been taught by the Buddha. And this is the path to awakening. So all compounded things means all our clothes, all our relationships, our possessions, the knowledge that we have, our thoughts, feelings, sensations, our bodies, these are all compounded. They arise due to causes, to phenomenal causes, to metaphysical causes, to emotional causes. Many vectors of causation meet together and give me the sense that I'm me, or that this is my house, this is my job, these are my children. These are emergent phenomena, and then they change. So what was the case is no longer the case. So the imputation of true, essential, substantial, definitional coherence in any object, whether it appears to be outside or inside, is, from the Buddhist position, a falsity. It comes as a kind of easy solution, the attempt to solidify the dynamic. So again and again, we want to return to the dynamic. So yesterday we began by doing some shine, some quiet sitting, and then moved into vipassana, doing the scanning of the body, taking our attention to the top of our head and then down through the body to the feet and back up, which is a way of tuning in to the fact that aliveness is unfolding or process or emergence, and that when you catch an emergent phenomena and wrap it in a concept, you can then start to build up a picture of concepts. And in your mind, you start to think, I'm simply describing what's there. And from the Buddhist point of view, that's a lie. What you are doing is you are constructing the situation. So, for example, say you're scanning through your body, and at a certain point you feel something in your jaw, some little burning or some little funny sensation. And then a thought arises, I haven't been to the dentist for a while. Maybe there's something wrong with my tooth. Not a difficult leap to do. That we do that kind of thing all the time. So now this little bit of sensation is a sign, maybe there's something wrong with my tooth, I need to do some action. So this is a sequence of thoughts. And if we follow the sequence of thoughts, we're going to phone up the dentist, make an appointment, and go along there and get our teeth checked. That is activity. there's something wrong with my tooth is a thought. I'm going to check it out. That's a movement of thought into activity. I have to find the number of the dentist. I phone the dentist. The reception is busy, so I phone back later. It's all sequences of activity unfolding. There isn't a thing there. Then the dentist says, oh yes, there's something, you know, the crown that I put on last time is a little bit loose, and sometimes some food gets in there, and that's why we can do it again, or it's not so bad. And he's basically saying, if he's a good, or she's a good dentist, she says, you can spend money if you want, but you don't have to. That's it. So there you're back with options and choices. What will I do? Samsara is the field of doing. It is the field of energy or participation or unfolding. If you like, nirvana is the domain of being, that which just is, which is not doing anything. So we want to, through the meditation, to come into the open, naked awareness, which reveals the ceaseless movement of energy. These are not in opposition. It's not that either or. It's both and. The mind is both open and empty and full of the movement of energy. And because these are inseparable, the movement of energy is simply influential display. When you have a fluid, the influence, the movement of the energy moves into the field and brings about changes in patterns. It doesn't establish things. Thingness is a delusion. But if we say there are no things, there is nothing, it doesn't mean there's nothing at all. It's not a nihilistic oblivion. It's the lightness of the unfolding of the becoming of being. So that's a resume of what we were doing yesterday. So maybe we can do some sitting now. Begin by doing the calming practice, focusing on the experience of the breath at the nostrils. And when you stabilize a bit of the focused attention, bring the attention to the crown of your head and start to just move through the body and let the body show you what is there. Don't interpret, don't tell your body what it is, just stay with the showing. Stay with the showing and just move at a slow, steady pace down through the body and then back up again and see what shows. Any questions about that practice before we start? Okay. Oh, sorry, on you go. Sure, that's fine. So eyes open or closed depending on yourself. Usually the mouth is slightly open with the tongue on the hard palate, but some people find it easier to close the mouth. The key thing is, if you say the technique is right and I'm not very good at the technique, what have you done to yourself? We are here and we are ourselves the unique specificity of our embodiment. So we are in dialogue with the technique. That's the important thing. If you become the slave of the technique, then what are you voting for? Fascism. The great dictator always knows best. The great dictator wants to tell you what to do. And if you want to be a slave, you can always be a slave. There's always going to be bullies to tell you what to do. But these techniques are things you have to inhabit. That's why they are practices. When you buy new boots for the winter or you buy a new jacket, it's a bit funny at first because the jacket is a jacket. And then as you wear it, it becomes your jacket. And it snuggles into you. And your boots now are really comfy. So that's what we need to do with a meditation practice. It's a two-way movement. So it's very important to check out how it is for yourself. Okay. Again, two practices used together are very useful if we get caught up in a lot of worries or our lives seem very heavy and structured, because they just open up a bit of space. We live in a world of increasing commodification, in which so many aspects of the world can be traded, and time and space become commodities. Just walking around in Macclesfield, it's amazing at the number of estate agents there are. Seems to be a lot of concern with buying and selling of properties. And a lot of the land in Britain, as we know, is owned. You can buy a space. If you have a flat, you have a particular kind of space. If you have a bigger house, you have more space. But we all need some space to live. And space becomes increasingly expensive because people from other countries want to come to Britain and buy British spaces. Chinese people from Malaysia find it very helpful to buy British spaces because our spaces are more secure than spaces in their country. They believe that our government's not going to seize their space, as might happen in their own country. So as international capital moves around and takes on a life of its own, the appropriation of space becomes very powerful. And we know from the development of industrialization, with the development of the mills particularly, in this kind of area, although mainly the silk looms were quite small hand production, when you go into Lancashire and the bigger mills, once machines come in, you have machine time. And machine time shouldn't stop. I worked in a continuous production paper mill for a while, and this big machine, which was very, very long, went 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, never stopped. It only stopped if it snarled up, and then they got it going again, because you're going to keep it going. In the old days with the blast furnaces, it's such a bother to close them down, they would just keep them going. If the machine keeps moving, the people who work with the machines are the servant of the machine. In the old days, when you went out into the field with the scythe to cut the corn for the harvest, you did it according to the rhythm of the body, and then someone would bring you out some food in a basket and maybe some cider to drink, and you go on and do a bit. But once you have a combine harvester and you're hiring the combine harvester and it's very expensive to hire, you want to whack up and down these fields and not stop. And you can see that in the summertime, it's just whacking up, whacking down. So we move from body time, which is relational time, in which the fact that I'm tired and I need to have a pee is important. It's part of the process. But if you're working with a conveyor belt, the fact that you need a pee is not very important, because the product's going to keep coming. And so you have standardized breaks, not the time of the body, not the movement of the body. Your back starts to get sore, you can't stop because you have to do that. So we are used to people being entrained into that kind of production, and now it's people in offices with computers, open plan offices where there's nowhere to hide and you have to stay there for a long time to impress your boss so that you don't lose your job. All of these are ways in which insecurity and the absenting of subjectivity from human beings occurs. So if you have a zero contract job, if you have no security, there's a kind of anxiety in that, because you don't know how much work you're going to have. So it's then very difficult to plan ahead. So there's a kind of unsettledness that comes in, which is a lot in the economy just now. That's very far away from meditating in a Burmese village or a Tibetan village. We have so much insecurity and instability, and the sense that the locus of control, the site of where decisions are made in our culture is projected out into the World Bank, into big multinational corporations who will open a factory and close it according to their notion of pricing and availability of resources. The destabilization of the situation is a disempowering of the subject to say, this is my life and I can work with circumstances. So I think in terms of practice, we need to factor that into the situation. And we can see when we look around this room, this is not a weekend party for teenagers. You know, our average age is not 21. We have to think, well, why wouldn't 21-year-olds be interested in this? Some of us got interested in Buddhism when we were 17, 18, 21, and so on. It was something that intrigued us in our youth, thinking about what's the meaning of life, or what could you do with your life, or how could things be different. But it appears, certainly in my movement around Dharma groups, that the average age progresses as we all progress, and younger people don't very much come into Dharma. Something is in the air, because people are preoccupied with other concerns, with holding life together, with getting a job. And of course, they're bound into the endless demands that come from texting and the internet and Twitter and so on. Social media eat up so much of life's time. And it seems important to respond. You get a message, and if you want to be part of the gang, you have to respond to be part of it. The unfolding, instead of the unfolding being something that in the quietness of your mind you see the whole shebang, subject and object unfolding, if you're not engaged in planning when to meet and so on, you're out of the loop. And the loop means that you bind yourself into reactivity. So these are cultural factors. We live at a time of huge changes in the culture in which stability and calm is not very privileged. And the notion that was around, say, 100 years ago, that elders with a lifetime of experience might have some depth of support to give you, or even wisdom to offer you, this is all washed away. Because everything is about information, and the new information is coming from younger and younger people. So old people are just a drag, they're expensive for the NHS, they don't know what the hell to do with their computer, and what are we for? Eating, breathing, why bother? So that's a huge cultural shift. That this before it was a notion of a distillation process, just as if you have grapes, then you pick the grapes, you make the wine, you take some of the wine and the lees, what's left in the bottom of the production barrel, and you can distill that and make a brandy or a grappa or a fin de Bourgogne. You're distilling. And so you're getting a refinement. That is vanishing. Everything is just the immediacy of the crude, tweeting as a sudden impulsive thought. The most powerful man in the world just tweets without thinking. So what you have is, instead of a lively, fresh, connected spontaneity, you have the impulsivity of the person who has to be right. The great cosmic dog that must piss on every lamppost. This is this is very difficult, because it's so quick. This is the terrifying thing in the American schools, where young people in a bad mood get an automatic rifle. It means you just press the trigger and 100 bullets come out. You don't even have to go bam, bam, bam with your finger. One little tug is enough, and the whole thing runs by itself. Automatization. Meditation goes in a very different direction. And particularly when we're thinking about death, Because as we get older and we experience the gradual collapse of the power of our sense organs, that we need to get reading glasses or distant glasses, and the arches in the feet start to collapse a bit and you get more aches and pains. All of these are reminders of the nature of embodiment. But if you have a culture which is led by very young people who are very healthy and hopeful, the whole view is very different. So we can remember being young and running around and being very free, unconstrained. Everything is possible. Anything is possible. When you get older, that's not true at all. So when you have a culture which wipes out the voices of older people, then the breaks, which are to say, hang on a minute, we've been here before, Kokani, be careful, that vanishes. And so we get this endless acceleration. Now these robots are coming, and we hear this. Over the horizon, coming from the next valley, is robots. And the robots are going to change the economy. People keep saying this, as if it's something inevitable. They don't have to have robots. Many people will lose their jobs. Why? Because we need to have robots. Why do we need to have robots? Because some people will make money. And who's going to stop them doing it? That is karma. That is the drivenness of the seeming inevitability of cultural formations, where instead of seeing these as processes, where at each moment there are options and you can make a choice, it's just how it is. Just how it is a formulation of stupidity. It's not just how it is, it's how it is according to certain decisions. And if the decisions are made by a few powerful people who are less and less answerable, then it appears to be the case. And the reason for thinking about society and the socio-economic structures is to keep seeing this is unfolding, this is changing. It's never a done deal. It's never a done deal. It only becomes a done deal when everybody decides this is how it is. But it's only this is how it is due to causes and conditions, due to decisions, due to going along with things. And when that changes, people can do something different. So our power as people is not the power of mastery, which is the power of big, powerful international corporations. It's the power of participation. And we have to communicate and stay connected. Because everyone is creative. The commodification of creativity, the marketing of it as a particular province of artists is very damaging. Art means doing, it means making things, and linked with art is artifice, which is falsity, false production, and artificiality. So the artist makes the artificial. The artifact is artificial. It is not, as it were, natural. It's not arising of itself. So if you start to privilege the artificial, then those who can make something artificial, especially if it seems to be unique and special, are ascribed special gifts. They are able to do things we can't do. So Michelangelo clearly could draw in a particular way, Leonardo da Vinci and so on. There are many great artists who could do many things. That is to say, they made products. Products are objects. Objects exist in the world and are ascribed a market value, which is then moved around. And the more we praise an artist, the more you have to pay to buy the products of that artist. And that's the modern art market, which is just a big PR job, isn't it? You've got to have somebody to pump for you in Art Today or one of the art magazines and write up and say this is amazing, innovative, blah, 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 blah. Then you get a little show and everybody comes and you get friends to send out little messages. You inflate it. Everything's about inflation. What is there? Something. What is that something? Something you experience. Who is the artist? The experiencer. A book without a reader is useless. When the reader reads the book, they read their book. It doesn't matter who wrote the book. When you read a book, you get your book. You don't get the same book as anyone else. We even see that at school. When you have to write an essay, you write an essay on, I don't know, The Merchant of Venice. So everybody in the class has to read a bit of The Merchant of Venice, Act 1, Scene 2, give an account of what happened. All the essays are different. Why is that? Because each child, small, undeveloped mind, each child is different. And as they read the play, they enter into their own particular relationship with it. Their mind, imbued with their life history, their family values and so on, comes into relation with the words on the page, and something arises. Now that is creativity, and that's what we do all the time. Co-emergence is co-creativity. Subject and object come together. This is why the primordial Buddha in the general Tibetan systems, Dorji Chang, he has his hands crossed like this. It means wisdom and compassion, but particularly means subject and object are together, inseparable. So, if you see how you are in the world, that you are making your world by what you bring to it, then you see, oh, this is the creativity of the mind. And what I'm creating is not things, but moments. I am creating the particular quality of this moment through the mode in which I participate in it. So if I'm in a bad mood, and for whatever bloody-minded reason I want to remain in my bad mood, I'm going to be pissed off whatever you say, because I'm just pissed off. Don't try and cheer me up. I'm fucked off about this. Just leave me alone. Except don't leave me alone, because I want to share my fucked offedness with you. So, in that way, I am obdurate. I'm hardening myself and hanging on to my state. But of course, as soon as I really connect with you, how you are meets how I am, and there's some movement. And optimally, if I'm available, I'm going to be touched and moved by you, so that how I am is you, me, you. So instead of the individual as someone separate who's got a big threshold and I will decide how I want to be, you get through to me. When we are healthy and happy, that's how life is, isn't it? People get through to us. Sometimes it makes us unhappy because they tell us a story and it makes us sad. But we are in it together. And when we sit in isolation and seal ourselves off, then it is as if we can choose. But actually what we're choosing is to be resistant. We're making ourselves impermeable. We're Tefloning the surface of ourselves so as not to let the other person through. And we probably all experience that in a relationship. You meet someone, you feel very open to them, you vibrate with however they are, and then at a certain point you start to seal off. You've had enough. I don't want this anymore. And then there's nothing much they can do, or if the other person's doing it to you, the moves that you could do before that would kind of catch them or make them smile doesn't work anymore, because they're gone. They're functionally gone. So in Dzogchen, as we touched on yesterday, there's not much writing about love and compassion, because love and compassion are intentional acts. They're moods that we try to create in order to make the world warmer and more flowing. But the point of view of Dzogchen is, from the very beginning, everything has been within. This is Dzogchen, the great completion. Everything is within the great circle, or the great tigli, which means a drop, means a bowl, because a bowl has no corners or edges. It includes everything. So everything is already within, and connectivity is the order of the day. Everything is connected. So when we read in the text that the mind is open, and its clarity, and its co-emergence, clarity means, here we are, we're all sitting together in this room, we're aware of our body, and we're aware of other people's bodies, and we're aware of the ceilings and the walls and the lamps. From where I'm sitting, I can see out the windows, and so I see the trees and so on. All of this arises at once. There is an undivided field of experience, the all-at-onceness of the world. So whenever I am, something else is. Even if you wake up in the morning and your eyes are closed and you're in the bed, you are there, but there's still the warmth of the duvet resting on you, or the feeling of the mattress underneath you. Subject and object are always together. Then you get up, you clean your teeth and so on. You're moving in the world. You and the world are in a co-emergent movement or a dance. This is our life. So we're not going from the outside in. It's the illusion of being on the outside which creates all the problems. When we say to someone, I love you, it's a kind of inclusive gesture, isn't it? It's not saying, I welcome you into my world. But you're already in my world. So if we stay with the immediate phenomenology of clarity, everyone's already in my world. When you walk down the street and you pass people, you don't know their name, you don't know anything about them, but they are participants in your world. They are features of your world, as the birds, the trees, the clouds, the rain. This is your experience. And it's unfolding. We receive the world by being part of it. And we lose the world, and we lose ourselves by retreating into the delusion of isolation. So in Buddhism, illusion and delusion refer to individuality, individualizing, separating ourselves. That doesn't mean, of course, that we're not all unique and specific in the emergence of our own patterning. Every child has something different to say about the Merchant of Venice, because we all have our own take on things. We take things up according to our dispositions, tendencies, likes and dislikes and so on. But it doesn't mean that we are apart. We are unique and specific within. Does that make sense? If you get a flavor of that. So the fact that we are different, it doesn't mean we're different other, we're just different hello. And your difference is part of the richness of my world. Because if you were all the same, imagine if you were all robots. That would be pretty horrible. You all had exactly the same programming. You all had exactly the same response. But some people look as if they're half asleep. Some people looking up at the ceiling. Some people look as if they might even be here. And it's like that. We all have our different way of participating. And as we are, so our world is. So this is the essential point here, that creativity is not a specialist quality. It is what is revealed when we give ourselves to being here. And the world emerges with us. So then we have some choices about how we use our energy. So it's not about saying that certain personality aspects are better than others. If you have a tendency to being critical and judgmental and bored, then you can observe what sort of a world that reveals for you. These are patterns, these are kind of flavors. It's almost like this is a stained glass window, and as the light of the fresh moment comes into it, you get a coloration of boredom or not being interested. And what does that reveal? Like kids in the backseat of a car on a long journey, getting really bored, played their games, eaten their chocolate, we're not there yet. They're just bored. And some children, blessedly, are quietly bored, and others are whiny bored, and whiny bored is pretty unpleasant. I shouldn't be bored. But of course, boredom is part of life. Depression is part of life. Sadness, loneliness, all of these are part of life. The problem is if you over-identify with a particular patterning of energy and it becomes your home base, and that's what you do, and it's what other people expect you to do because that's what I'm like. That's the fruit of individuation, not in the Jungian sense, but the individualization, the separating off of myself and the attribution to myself of personal qualities. I'm often bored, I don't find life interesting, and I don't know why I'm here. I think I should die. Some people who move towards suicide can't find any pathway in the world. Their energy starting to vibrate on very familiar tracks, and they have a lot of repetition compulsion. The same way as if you get trapped in anorexia nervosa, or obsessive compulsive disorders, or patterns of extreme bulimic eating and so on. These are all familiar patterns of energy, because if you're deciding not to eat, that's an energetic formation with a particular orientation of interpretation of how you look in the mirror. You think you're fat, everyone says you're very thin, but you're hanging on to your reading. Same with all the modes of addiction. They have the same sort of pattern. I have to, I need to, I'm a smoker. If you say, I'm a smoker, it's very difficult to stop smoking because you've taken smoking and incorporated it as part of your essential identity. Or if you say, oh, I've been smoking for 20 years, I remember when I started. Oh, so now I think, oh, there was a time when I didn't smoke, and then I started to smoke, and now I'm habituated to smoking. There's a bit more leeway, there's a bit more room for maneuver in starting to imagine, well, I could not smoke since I wasn't smoking when I was born. But if you say, I am a smoker, then you merge yourself into it. Or I am depressed, or I am just full of hate at how my life is. I'm disappointed. So each of us can observe for ourselves how the more we invest in a particular definition of ourselves, it invites in emotional intensity, and it brings a particular trajectory of interpretation of possibilities, and we find ourselves doing more and more to confirm this basic belief of who we are. And we know this in school. You know, when the kids who don't do too well and who are maybe a bit distracted and they get into being cheeky to the teacher, if they keep pushing that, if they get identified as being the bad person and they take that on as a badge of honor, and nobody praises them, but they get into a negative stroke economy where in order to get attention, I have to be disruptive in the class. That doesn't go in a very good direction. And every school has kids going in that way because they can't fit in, but they don't want to be nothing at all. They don't want to be wallpaper, and so they end up being bad and disruptive. And that can lead to lots of trouble. They're searching for identity. They're searching for a way of belonging. So if I can't belong in this group, I'll belong in that group. So the more we see the process of unfolding, we see that there are endless new pathways opening, that every moment is like a crossroads. There are different ways to go. But when we conceptualize ourselves in a fixed way, it's very clear there's lots of things in the world I couldn't do because I'm just me. And if we're lucky, the one we end up thinking I'm just me as is fairly broad, but sometimes it becomes very narrow. So all of the Buddhist practices we do and all of our understanding is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Over definition, foreclosure, closing down the possibilities because you predicted your way into it, it's that causes a lot of problems. So in relation to death, if we just stay with the idea of suicide, what is life? Well, clearly what we're looking at here is that life is a stream of unfolding possibility, and there's always some degree of room for maneuver. But once you intensify identification with a very narrow pattern, it may appear to you clearly there is no way forward. This is impossible. So, for example, when the War of Independence of Bangladesh occurred, the army of what was then West Pakistan carried out a very intentional process of rape. And many of the girls who were raped hanged themselves from trees with their saris or threw themselves down the well because, having been raped, they thought they couldn't survive. And then the government, at the end of the war, as soon as there was independence, the government brought this huge policy in of honouring the women who had been raped. It was a very, very amazing social turn that was done. And they made a lot of medical attention, and then there was a very honouring way of talking, and they made special marriage brokering arrangements to help these girls get a new life. It was a very wonderful thing, because we see in many countries that just doesn't happen. Because you get a marker on your life, you are a victim of this, and it wouldn't have happened to you if you'd been a good girl, because there's only good girls and bad girls, and because this happened to you, you're now moved into the camp of being the bad girl. If you're a bad girl, there's no future. So we're all aware of this. This is what happens when you get a strong definition. When you don't see any way ahead of you, because this brand, this mark of Cain is on your forehead, why not die? So people who go to suicide through depression, they're in a similar situation. They may well have some trauma in their history, but it's an over-determined notion of identity, that you and the situation have become so fused that you can't see any way forward. So, in terms of love and compassion, when we can connect with people and open up some possibilities of communication, of toing and froing, of connectivity, that's the great thing. That what flattens us as human beings and what kills us off is totalizing definition. Zopa Chembo is concerned with infinity, and infinity is very different from totalization, because the infinite, by definition, is you never get to an end of it. It never becomes finite. It's more and more and more and bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's always possibilities. When you've got a totalizing system, then you can add up someone's qualities, come to a final definition about them, and you've got them. Whether they're Tutsi or Hutu or Jewish or black or Scottish or whatever, if you don't like that group and you've got their number, you've now got them, and there's nothing else to be added, because that's the total story about you. The only thing I need to know about you is what family you were born in, or what color you are, or what your sexual orientation is. And now I know what you're like. That's terrifying. It's reducing this rich complexity of our potential to some tiny little definition. So most of us in stages in our childhood have been shamed and judged and made to feel guilty and bad. And we know what that retractive feeling is like. So this is one of the great things about meditation, is it gives you the possibility of sitting and feeling the retraction, feeling how you're on your own case, and just releasing it. Oh, that's just a thought. That's just a memory. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. You know, if you're meditating on your own, you might find your body's just seizing up. Something arises. And then it's gone. And then it's gone. Which is why in Dzogchen the main thing is to relax and release. The past is gone. The future hasn't yet arrived. There's just this moment and it's open. And so I have my huge potential and I have my identity. And my identity is a very, very narrow slice of my potential. So the more I stay in this box of my identity, most of which was given to me by the big people on my case when I was small, if I sit in this identity, I am forgetful of my potential and beneath that the ground of my own being, the open freshness of the Buddha mind. So that's the real function of meditation, is to keep loosening the retractive, totalizing definition which operates towards ourselves and towards other people. As it says in the good book, judge not lest ye be judged. It moves both ways. So the less we judge ourselves, the less we judge other people, and then there's more possibility of communality and interaction. Okay, so if we take a break now and then we can come back and look more at the view of Dzogchen in relation to death.